profesor. Directo. Rápido. ¿Ah? Sí, ahora. Ya.
Espérame, hija. Vamos a buscar
Un segundito, partamos el tiro. Lo pensaba hacer en inglés, pero no hay nadie que hable inglés. Así. Ah, perfect. So I'm gonna make it in English. Don't worry. Okay. So 1 minute. I'm gonna start right away. let's start. Right. Sorry for the delay. I was preparing some stuff because I'm transmitting on live on YouTube, so other people from outside can join. And stream here. So today the idea is to revive this chance that we have here internally in Nizum, which is the Tech Talks, which is open for everyone. Okay, if you feel like sharing some knowledge about some technology or some library, language or whatever, you can book on whatever day, whatever time, and share with everyone. Okay? So this is the idea, yeah, to start doing this again. In fact, on January, Amador Marin, which is working in Latam, is planning to give a presentation about how to improve the performance of web pages. And so I invite all of you to organize something, to create a presentation and organize it. It's not hard. You just need to send an email to Paola Donato. Everybody knows Paola Donato. And tell her that you would like to do a TikTok. You tell her the title, the day, and the hours, and that's all. It's not that near complex. So let's start. Hooks. Everybody has worked with React at least once. Once? Perfect. Hooks use a proposal. Well, first of all, I'm Piero. Everybody knows me here. But as transmitting online, maybe know someone doesn't know me. I'm a functional lead and full stack developer here in Nizum. So, today I would like to present you about Hooks, which is a proposal that the React team showed for the first time this year on October in the React Conf. That happened in, I don't remember which city, but in USA. And they proposed this new feature that is still a proposal. Okay, so there's still working in progress in this. So there are modifications going on, and is not intended to be used on production right now. Okay, it's intended just to show the feature to the community and tell the community, play with it, and tell your feedback. Okay. Why they propose this? Basically, because they have found many these three main issues during the time the React has been used by the community. Okay. For example, the first one is code reusing, which is one of the main features that comes with the component-based design. That the idea is that you, by build or by putting one block of component next to each other or one over another one, you can reuse code logic more easily, right? The other problem that they have seen during this time is that sometimes we have components that cannot be breaking down in other subcomponents, so they get so huge and by then complex. Okay. And also the React team claims that classes are complex for humans and are complex for machines too. We're gonna go deeper now on each of those points. The first one when we try to reuse code, there are two main patterns, or there are two very popular patterns. The first one is the high order components, and the second one is render props. Okay, the first one, high order components, is basically components that receive component as an input and return another component. Okay, so by then we can reuse the logic without having the same logic spread in different components. Okay, for example, here we have the connect, which is used in Redux when we connect to the state, the main state, and we pass the map state to props and then map dispatch to props. Okay. This is one example of high order components. That helps us a lot to reuse code. Yeah. The other one is render props. The props are the input of the components, right? And so, in order to isolate, or in order to improve the separation of concern, we tell the components, don't just be in charge of render, or how can I say?
Take the prop and use a output.
Yeah, but I mean, you don't define the logic how to render a props into the components. You just pass it as a props and tell, you know what, take this prop and show and display it. But it doesn't matter how the prop is. You know? So the prop here, the render prop would be the render prop of a road. The road is a component that we're using in React Router. Okay. So with these two patterns, we can reuse a lot of code. I mean, we can improve the reuse of logics in our application. Okay. But there is a problem with this kind of patterns. Is that the wrapping hell? What is a wrapping hell? Is that by using these kind of patterns, when the application gets complex and more complex on time, the final HTML is gonna get like this. You know, so it's gonna get way complex. So the DOM tree is gonna get way bigger, which is affect the performance whenever we want to re-render something. All right. The other issues that the React team have found is that when we want to, for example, use a state in a component, because everybody knows that there are two kinds of components, functional component and class-based component, right? Basically, when we want to use a state in a component, or a stateful component, we need to implement, or we need to define the component as a class, right? We need to define the component as a class and also extend component interface from React. So we have access to a state and also to the component lifecycle, right? The problem with that is that when we want to, for example, define a non-click in a button or in an element, we need to define a handler, you know, and into the handler we can define a lot of logic, and that logic can be spread in different other lifecycle methods. So the separation of concern doesn't work pretty well there, because the similar logic is gonna be the same logic is gonna be in different sites in the same component, right? And also, whenever we want to use a handler or a function, normally we'll have to use binding and other stuff. The second method, the second issue I already mentioned, and also as classes get bigger and bigger, or the component gets bigger and bigger, it's hard to understand and also to follow how it works, right? Because we have the lifecycle components, we have, the lifecycle methods, and also the handlers, and also other helper functions in the same class or the same component. So whenever someone new of the team, or whenever someone new of the project start working on it, it's hard to understand how everything works in one component. And also finally, the other issue that the React team has found is that classes impact the performance whenever they have tried to improve the compiler of the React engine. Why? Because it's hard for the machine to see if a method is going to be used in the future or when you minify the final JS or not. So in that case, they have found that using classes normally impact the performance. However, the React team have seen these many issues. They realize that these are the symptoms of one big problem, which is that React doesn't provide a stateful primitive simpler than a class component. What that means that if we want to use a state in a component, or we want to define a stateful component, we must use classes right now. There is not another alternative, right? And also the same happens with the lifecycle method. If we want to use both or one of those, we must define the component as a class. So they came up with hooks. Hooks are functions that let you hook into a React component, a state and lifecycle features from function components. So with hooks, we can define our components as a functional component and also use states and some lifecycle methods. That's the idea of the hooks. The first hook I'm gonna show you is the use state, which is used to use a state to define a state of a component. In this case, they are coming in. We import it from the React library, and we define it like this. We define the state name, the name of the state, and then we define a handler. This is going to be the handler, and then we use a state function with the initial value of the state. Everybody understand this notation? Who doesn't understand? No. This is an array structure. Okay, so then we use it normally, like we use it as a normal state. We use it here, you click count, and the on click, we define it here. Yeah.
Do we need to follow some convention by naming the
Yes, I am going to explain that afterward. Yeah, there are convention and also rules that we need to follow when we implement hooks. Okay, but I'm going to explain them. No worry. The second hook that is built that coming with React is the use effect. The use effect basically can replace the three lifecycle methods, which are the component did mount, the component did update, and the component will unmount. Okay. So here we can have access to the DOM API, document title, for example. Okay. In the different here, the use effect receive a function as a parameter. Here we can receive primitive types, objects, whatever. And then this is gonna be executed whenever the component will mount, or whenever the component will update, or whenever the component after it was mounted. These are not the only hooks that are built in. There are many others. The basic one are the use state, the use effects, the use context, and also we have other hooks, for example, the reducer, the use callback, memo, etc. And also you can build your own hooks. Okay, so that is important. And I'm gonna show you a demo there. I'm gonna show you how to use hooks, and I'm gonna show you a comparison between how we can improve or how the component how can I say that, how the code gets better when we use hooks. And give me 1 second. So all right. Can you? No, you cannot see. Let me. Can you see? Nice. Everybody can read the code. Where was it? I don't know if I can. Here. Perfect. First of all, we need to be sure that we are using the alpha because, as I mentioned before, this is a proposal. So it's not available in the release. In the release version. So we use that. Okay. So in this example, in this demo, I'm gonna build a basic counter, just for a matter of time. A basic counter. Okay. What I'm gonna do first, I'm gonna define a counter using normal React, or how normally we would do it. Okay. So first we import React from React, right? As the counter is gonna be stateful, we have to use a class to define it, right? So class counter extends React counter components, and then we define the constructor for the super component, and then we are going to define the state, which is going to be the counter, right? And the initial value going to be 0. Okay. Then we define the render function, which is going to be the final representation of our component. Basically, it's gonna be a div. Normal counter and string. Here we're gonna define the value of the current value of the counter, and here we are just gonna define a button that will help us to increase the counter by 1. Alright? You still cannot see it because I need to display it yet. So let's do that first. Now we're gonna import our counter. counter, and then we choose C. I need to export it. Default counter, and then we have a counter, right? But the button doesn't work yet. To do that, we need to define a handler, right? Normally, what we would do is to define on click, and here we're gonna handle on click plus 1. So we take the handle on click plus 1, and we're gonna call the set state, and we define the new value of the state, the new value of the counter, which is gonna be the counter, the current value of the counter plus 1. Okay. But it still doesn't work. Why not? Because we don't have access to the disk in classes. Yes, we can use that, but we cannot. I mean, yes, there are many different. I mean, there are alternative by using the define the bind in the constructor, define the bind in line when we use it, or use an arrow function. Right? Those three are valid. But the problem is that not everyone knows that. So when you have many people working in the same project, sometimes we will see binds, sometimes we will see arrow functions, unless you define it. You define a standard assertive. Right? So we can use let's define as an arrow function. Wait. Huh? No works. Good. But what if we want to add another button? We will have to do the same. But this is gonna be minus. I have to define another one. Right? Work. Good. Now let's build the same counter component with using hooks. So we will see the difference. Even if it is a small component like this one, very simple one. Counter hook. So we start doing our boilerplate, but now we can export. We're gonna define it better like counter hook as a function, and we are going to export default counter hook. We are going to return the definition of our component, which is basically the same JSX. The difference is that we are going to use counter instead, and we're gonna change that into. Now we're gonna use our first hook, which is a use state, and then we use it. Const counter, the variable that is gonna hold the state, and the handler to change that state. And then we call the use state with the initial value. Right? So then we can just use it. If I want to define the functionality of the +1, we can pass just an anonymous function. Call the set state with the counter +1. Alright. And the same thing with -1. So now we import our new component from here. Hook. Counter hook. And now let me define the hooks. And then we have our two components. Right? Does it work? Good. Does it work? Both components are working. But now, if you compare, maybe begin this to put next to each other. A browser. Browser. You will see the amount of code decreases a lot when we use hooks. That's one of the main purposes of this proposal, which is decrease the complexity, and also we can reuse, I mean, of course, also improve the code reuse by implementing our own hooks. In this case, we don't need to implement our own hooks. In another scenario, we could use it. We could do it. All right. Good. But let's see the other one, which is use effect. I'm gonna make it here too, because what if I want to display or change the title of our web page automatically whenever we click on one of those buttons of change the content? In the normal way, we could define the component in mount, and here we can use the document title counter gonna be oh sorry wait. You're completely right. So okay, if we want to change the title, we can just define the component did update, and we can define our title counter as one. Sorry, this state that counter. let's open it. Well, loading. Doesn't load. You can see now, but I want to display this one in another. There you go. So now we see. I want to just.
Are you using Chromecast?
Yeah,
Share the desktop.
you're right. Let me try that. Nobody gave me only two alternatives, remote and both pantallas. Ah, there you go. Well, no me muestra la web. Título. No me muestra.
Escritura, exhibición de cambio de escritorio.
Yes. Muchas gracias. Good. So the thing that I wanted to show you is. Anyway, you can see. I was doing a zoom here, but you can see that I can change the title. You know? It's good. But what if I want to call, I don't know, maybe another external service? You know, I have to start implementing all of the component lifecycle methods. But in hooks, we basically can use this as a use effect, and then we pass a function as a parameter, and then we can encounter with hook plus cut. And if we work, you know, difference. So if we compare the two codes, we're gonna realize that the complexity decreases a lot of the classes. It's easier to understand how the component works, and also as we have less code, the application is gonna get smaller when we minify it, etc. Right? Okay. But those are not the only benefits. There are many more. But before moving on to the benefits, I would like to show you the different rules that we need to follow when we use hooks. Right? The first one, I try it and it's a must. So it's not just a convention. It's if you don't follow that rule or if you break it, you're gonna get an error. So the first one, only call the hooks at the beginning. What it means, just here at the top of your function. Okay. So you don't define here or somewhere. Always at the beginning. All the hooks. Okay. The other rule is don't call hook from regular JavaScript functions. Basically, the idea is to call the hooks from another hook. if you want to call a hook from another function, that function should be another or a custom hook. Okay. And this is a convention. We use the set to define the handler, and we use the suffix use to define the name of the hook in case we define a custom hook. It's a convention. If you want to know why with more detail, you can go here. In this URL, Dan Abramov, which is the creator of Redux, which is a member of the React team, explain step by step why you need to follow this rule. And also, the good thing is that there is an escalated plugin. So we see those errors when we are developing. So what are the benefits that come with it? Less boilerplate. We don't need to use class-based component. Right. We also improve the code reuse, and also we decrease the complexity, and we improve the separation of concern. I also found on internet when I was preparing the presentation examples, bigger components. For example, all the code that is highlighted with the same color belongs to the same logic. Basically, separation of concern. This is a component defined with a current state of React, and this is the same component defined using hooks. What is the difference here? Less complexity. It's easier to understand. Why is easy to understand? Because all the logic that belongs together is gonna be in the same place, in the same code, block of code. And also less line of code, therefore smaller. Another example is this animation. You can see the transformation. The big benefits, you can see the big benefits in bigger components. I mean, the example I just gave you is just to show how it works, but when we have bigger component, more complex component, we will see more the benefits of it. All right? That's all, guys. Thank you very much for coming. Any questions?
Are there something bad about React hooks?
Something bad?
Yes, because some is very good.
So far, there are, for example, the rules. The rules you always have to do it at the beginning. For example, you cannot use. I mean, they belong. I mean, they. Better show you the code. They relies on indexing the hook definition. For example, if I do here, for example, counter equal to. This is gonna work at the beginning, but then error.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
So whenever the React engine relies on the same index of your definition of the hooks. So whenever we run, whenever the React re-render the component, we'll believe that the hooks that was there should be there again. So, you know? This is what, well, there's a bad part. But the other thing is that it's still under development. It's planned to be released next year, the second quarter.
That is not necessarily bad.
No, not necessarily bad, but if we want to find something bad.
What do you think about React hooks?
Sorry?
What think you about React hooks?
My opinion about it.
Yeah, your opinion. I don't
The opinion, I haven't used it in bigger projects, but so far it's very promising. I see decrease a lot the complexity, and also the boilerplate that we have to do whenever we want to define or whenever we want to use a life cycle method or whenever we want to use a state in components. If we decrease the boilerplate, the error prone is gonna be lower too. So developers can move on faster and with less bugs and less errors. So it's very promising so far.
Are there any metrics about the improved performance?
I haven't found. Maybe there are someone, maybe not. There must be a blog that is studying or like the example I gave you. For example, you can find on internet videos like these
Okay.
or comparisons between the final minified application with hooks or without hooks. But I haven't found. But I believe the size it should be, and the size and the weight of the final file should be low, smaller. Yeah.
Can we use Redux with a component that is using hooks?
Yeah.
How?
We use reducer. The use reducer is a function. The function is a reducer basically.
Yes, I mean, how can we then get access to the props that are passed from the reducer to this component?
What do you mean?
I mean, when you use or when you connect a class-based component with Redux, using the connect function, you need to define the slab state props.
Yeah.
You need to pass the actions. Where are we going to get these props that is coming from Redux when you are using the hooks? Where?
I haven't used it, but I've seen an example that you pass the reducer, and if I don't remember wrongly, you pass the action. But I haven't used it as an example.
Similar as your Android that use it instead of class component, instead of connecting to the class component, you have the functional component. Android that, it's the same. It's just a component. It doesn't matter if it is a class, and it doesn't matter if it is a function. Actually, if you're using the use state with Redux, it must be dangerous. Because you're using an internal state
Yeah.
component
That's right.
that is actually trusting that the source of truth is going to be Redux store.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, you must take
Yeah, Joseph is right. You should not use this internal state if you're using a single store. This idea is that all the state of your application is managed only in one place.
Yes, got it, but I was asking that because let's say that I want to create an entire application using only hooks. So I wanted to know if it's possible to use it.
No, it's not possible to use only hooks. Remember that hooks replace the state or the internal state of a component, and also just 3 lifecycle methods of the whole list of lifecycle methods. So you cannot replace everything with hooks. You can replace just those 4 things.
Okay, so we need to still rely in some class-based component.
And some scenario, yeah, correct. And in fact, they say that in the presentation, in their conference. They tell the idea. Oh, that's another good thing to say. The idea is that in the future, they take the classes as another external package from React. Like what happened with the prop types. Remember that prop type before? It was an internal module of React, and now it's an external package, it's an external thing. The same idea what they want to do with the classes. They want to build React component just as a functional component in the future. Okay. And that's the vision they have. No question? No. Anyway, I'm gonna share you the slides, and also I use these links as a source You can check all of them. If you have more, you want to know further details. Okay? Thank you guys. And I encourage you to organize something. You don't need to be expert on anything. Just organize. It's just for us. It's to share knowledge between us and
The process is
Ah?
the process is to hire an email to power.
sorry.
To organize something.
You can ask me how to do it. It's basically send an email to Paula Donato and tell her, hey, what to organize this day with this title, this topic. That's all. No more complexity. Alright guys? Thank you.